My name is Yazmin, and I'm here to discuss the selection that I chose to do my report on. The title that I picked is called You Just Don't Understand, subtitled Women and Men in Conversation, written by Deborah Tannen. She is a renowned author and professor with a PhD in linguistics, which she utilizes in the contents of this book. The focus is cross-gender linguistic differences, more specifically female versus male expressions and conversation styles. The objective is meant to inform the reader how these distinctions can affect our interpersonal relationships. The main analysis comes from transcripts of adults and children talking to each other, which are very, very informative. A few quantitative sources were referenced. Not enough, I would say, just because there's not really much about statistics or anything like that. But the themes discussed came down to 6 different components that follow the positions of male versus female interpretations in a conversation. The first one being status versus support, which was it talked about men growing up in a world where conversation is usually considered a contest. A term that she coined was one-upping each other, essentially. Whereas women grow up in a world where conversation is used to relate to each other. The second component would be independence versus intimacy, and this idea has to do with what each sex may struggle to preserve, basically. So whereas men don't want to need permission to secure their freedoms, and a woman may struggle with finding closeness, therefore needing to share connection through association. So independence versus intimacy. The third one, it would be advice versus understanding. So when there's a conflict or we seek or give support, men will look to give a solution versus women looking for bouts of reassurance through association and expressing that they can relate to that person, that man. The fourth one would be information versus feeling. So this would be in terms of a source of dissatisfaction. Would look like a lack of conversation, like literal conversation. So men may tend to look for or talk in a way that is only for the sake of knowledge, like sharing knowledge, versus women who talk to express kinship and again, like just through connection, like they talk to connect and to discuss how they feel. Number 5 would be orders versus proposals. And this topic is basically how we perceive requests. So men will associate a request as like a demand, versus women using specific language like let's to convey a suggestion. So orders versus proposals. Number 6, which would be the last one, would be considered conflict versus compromise, which is just basically how each sex handles opposition that come from disagreements. So more specifically, how we would pick and choose a fight. So conflict, approaching it head on, or compromise to basically absolve the disagreement. The contents of the book are like rampant with examples of conversations from, a wife and a husband versus, or something like along the lines of children playing in the schoolyard, which in the book they kind of seem drawn out, but they're really easy to follow. Like the storytelling is needed. The anecdotes are associated with each of those themes, so it's like very informative. And the center, I believe that the way that they compose the book follows asymmetries, so it's basically how they lay out their information. It's always each side is told. It does a decent job of giving a lot of diverse quotations, but I feel like it could have done with more, because context amongst cultures and backgrounds could probably look different, so I would have wanted more of that, I guess. But in theory, like, it's relative to male versus female, so I think that the value of the book comes from just simply giving perspective. Personally, I spend a lot of time having conversations with the opposite sex. I live in a household full of men. So I had a lot of shared experiences with each type of examples, but I do think the underlying conflict that I had with it was just like the technical aspect of separating, just leaving it only as men versus women. It just seems kind of like categorizing it in a general sense, which just comes off as like gender stereotypes. But aside from that, I didn't really find myself disagreeing with the messages. I feel like it just remained on the theme of using these tools to help us recognize where we would misunderstand the other person in our conversations based on, their sex. But after you realize that there are different distinguishing conversational styles, even I started to recognize it in my own life, basically. So it helped me improve my interpersonal relationships because immediately I started using this new information basically in my own conversation. So of course I would recommend the book, honestly. So it helps you understand those conversational styles, and it fills in like specific communicational gaps as it pertains to the title. Because I know we've all experienced at some point or another, miscommunication between the opposite sex, and the book encourages you to make adjustments and allows you to see things from a different perspective. If you are willing to put in that effort, the book can be extremely insightful. Thank you for your time.